The lights were too bright, the questions too sharp, and the smiles too fake. Keanu Reeves felt it in his bones the moment he sat down on the couch of The View Line, a daytime liberal talk show with a reputation for ambush-style interviews. He had come in peace, ready to speak about a project that meant the world to him, a new foundation dedicated to helping abandoned children with education, therapy, and safe homes. But the tone of the conversation shifted quickly. At first, the hosts smiled and nodded, letting him speak about loss, kindness, and hope. But then, out of nowhere, the mood snapped. Sharon, one of the most aggressive hosts on the panel, leaned in with a smirk and said, "You act like some spiritual warrior, Keanu, but you made your fortune shooting people in movies. Isn't that a bit dishonest?" Before Keanu could respond, another host piled on, "You stay silent when things really matter. People think you're neutral, but isn't that just another word for privileged?" The crowd gasped. The air turned cold. Keanu blinked, stunned, not because he was speechless, but because of how carefully this attack had been set up. He looked at them, then directly at the camera and spoke slowly. "Is this an interviews or a setup? If y'all are done pretending, just say it." And with that, he calmly removed his mic, stood up, and walked off live TV. The clip went viral in minutes. Fans defended him fiercely. Headlines popped up worldwide. Keanu walks out. Keanu snaps. Keanu exposes fake show. But no one expected what would happen next. Just 3 days later, Keanu filed a lawsuit against the network. Not for defamation, not for breach of trust, but for something far more explosive. Something he had secretly recorded that night. And the world wasn't ready for what was about to come. The next few days were a blur of headlines, social media posts, and endless discussions. But what no one knew was that Keanu had prepared for this moment long before it happened. The lawsuit wasn't just about the personal attack he had faced on live television. It was a carefully planned move to expose something far darker. When he left the set that day, he didn't just walk away in frustration. He walked away with evidence. Hidden cameras inside the studio had recorded every conversation, every scheming discussion, and every plan that led to the trap being set for him. The hosts were not just playing the part of innocent interviewers, they were part of a much larger agenda. Keanu, always a man of peace, knew that his silence in the face of injustice would be a betrayal to those who looked up to him. So he took action. The lawsuit he filed wasn't just a defense of his own character. It was a message to the world. No one gets to use my name for their agenda, not while I'm alive. As the legal battle unfolded, Keanu remained focused on his charity. But the public saw a new side of him, an unstoppable force, not just an actor. People began to rally behind him. The truth was becoming clear, and the more they learned about what happened behind the scenes, the more they understood why Keanu had walked out. But as the case moved forward, something shocking was revealed. The network wasn't just after Keanu. They had targeted others before him, and one of the targets had been someone close to Keanu, someone who was now missing. Keanu couldn't believe what he was hearing. As his legal team dug deeper into the case, they uncovered something far worse than just a biased interview. The network had been running a smear campaign for years, targeting people they viewed as threats to their narrative. And Keanu, with his calm demeanor and refusal to get involved in politics, was the perfect target. But it wasn't just about silencing him. It was about controlling the message. The evidence his team uncovered revealed a network of corporate deals, media manipulation, and celebrity puppetry, all designed to keep certain voices quiet and others loud. This wasn't just about Keanu Reeves anymore. It was about the power these media moguls held over the public's perception of reality. And there, in the tangled web of lies, Keanu found something that made his heart drop. A list of names, celebrities, activists, and even politicians who had been silenced by the same methods. Among those names was someone he had known for years, someone he had trusted completely, his best friend. The news hit him like a ton of bricks. His best friend, an advocate for mental health, had been blacklisted after speaking out against the same liberal network. They had used everything they could, gossip, fake news, and even false accusations to ruin their career. Keanu had no idea, but the truth was staring him in the face. His best friend had been one of the first victims of this system, a casualty of a war he had no idea was even being fought. This revelation sparked a new fire inside Keanu. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for everyone who had been wronged, for those who had been silenced and manipulated by the powerful voices behind the screen. He took to social media, not just as an actor, but as a warrior for truth. "I won't stay silent anymore," he posted, his message reaching millions. "This fight is bigger than me." But the deeper Keanu went, the more dangerous things became. People who had supported him began to back off, afraid of what might come next. As the story started to unravel, it became clear the network wasn't just fighting to protect their brand. They were fighting to keep a dark truth from ever seeing the light of day. And as Keanu's lawsuit gained more attention, someone from his past came forward, someone who had all the answers Keanu had been searching for. But this person wasn't coming to him with good intentions. It was late one evening when Keanu received a call that would change everything. The voice on the other end was familiar, but it carried an edge he hadn't heard in years. "Keanu, we need to talk," the voice said, almost whispering. It was his former publicist, Mia, a woman who had been a close ally during the early days of his career. But after a fallout a few years ago, they had parted ways, and Keanu hadn't heard from her since. He had always wondered what had gone wrong between them, but now he knew. She was calling with information that could either make or break his case, and he wasn't sure if he should trust her. Mia explained that she had been quietly working behind the scenes, gathering intel on the very network Keanu was suing. She had started noticing patterns of manipulation long before Keanu did, but she had been too scared to speak out. Now, seeing the storm Keanu had stirred up, she felt it was time to come clean. "They've been watching you for years, Keanu. They knew you were a threat," Mia said, her voice shaking with fear. "But it's not just the network. There's a powerful group of elites who are pulling the strings. You're about to expose more than you think. You need to be careful." Keanu's mind raced. The more Mia spoke, the clearer it became that this was much bigger than just a biased interview. These weren't just simple media moguls trying to keep a star in check. They were part of a much larger, secretive network with far-reaching influence, one that had controlled everything from public opinion to political movements for years. They had been targeting individuals who were seen as too influential, too powerful to be allowed to have an independent voice. And Keanu had become their next victim. Not because of his movies or his charity work, but because of the truth he carried within him. Mia continued, "I have the names. Keanu, I've been holding on to these files, but I'm afraid it's too late for me. They're coming after me next." Before Keanu could ask more questions, the line went dead. Panic gripped his chest as he realized the weight of what was happening. He tried calling Mia back, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Keanu's instincts screamed at him to find her. She knew too much. He knew that whatever had happened to Mia could easily happen to him. The stakes were higher than ever. Keanu now had two choices: keep fighting the network in the public eye, or go underground and expose the truth in ways no one would expect. But before he could make that decision, another shocking twist came to light. The next morning, Keanu was woken by a breaking news alert. Mia had gone missing. Understood. I'll write each part as one continuous paragraph without extra spacing. Here's the continuation. The next morning, Keanu was woken by a breaking news alert. Mia had gone missing. The news sent a cold shiver down his spine. He had just spoken to her hours earlier, and now she was gone, vanished without a trace. The authorities were tight-lipped, but Keanu knew something wasn't right. This wasn't just a coincidence. Mia had known too much, and someone wanted to keep it all buried. The weight of the situation began to settle in. Keanu could no longer sit back and let things unfold. This wasn't just about his own reputation anymore. It was about exposing a system that had been manipulating the public for decades. Mia's disappearance wasn't just a random event. It was the final piece in the puzzle he had been putting together. As he sat in his office, staring at the evidence he had gathered, the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Mia. It was his lawyer, who was calling with an urgent update. Keanu, the network just filed a motion to dismiss your case. They're playing dirty. We need to act fast. Keanu took a deep breath and clenched his fists. He had expected this, but hearing it out loud made it all too real. They weren't just trying to silence him, they were trying to erase the truth. And Keanu wasn't going to let that happen. With a newfound sense of urgency, he reached out to his closest allies, people who had always stood by him. But even they were starting to pull away, afraid of the fallout. Keanu realized then that the fight wasn't just against the network, it was against the very system that controlled everything. But with Mia gone, the stakes had never been higher. He couldn't back down now. The truth needed to come out, no matter the cost. But the more he dug, the more dangerous things became. A shadowy figure from his past had resurfaced, and Keanu soon realized that they were far more involved in the conspiracy than he had ever imagined. Keanu's heart raced as the phone call ended. The figure on the other line had made it clear. The deeper Keanu went, the more dangerous it would become. This wasn't just a fight for justice anymore. It was a fight for survival. The shadowy figure from his past, someone he hadn't seen or spoken to in years, had resurfaced. John, his former bodyguard, a man who had vanished mysteriously after an incident Keanu had never fully understood. John's voice had always carried a weight, a sense of authority and danger, but now it sounded different, like it was laced with fear. Keanu, you have no idea what you're up against, John warned, his voice low and urgent. They're not just going to go after you, they'll go after everyone you care about. Keanu had no choice but to listen. John revealed that the network was only a small part of a much larger operation. Behind the scenes, there were powerful players, people with connections to both the media and the government, who had been running things for decades. These people had kept their secrets buried so deep that no one could reach them. But Keanu had gotten too close. His decision to take a stand had made him a target. The only way to survive, John said, was to expose the truth once and for all. They'll come for you, Keanu. They won't stop until they destroy everything you've built, John continued. Keanu's mind was racing. His instincts told him that John wasn't lying, but at the same time he couldn't let fear dictate his actions. His purpose was clear. He needed to bring the truth to light. But he had to be smart. He couldn't fight this battle alone. The fight had already cost him Mia, and the network's reach was growing stronger by the day. As the days passed, Keanu found himself questioning his own safety. The media that once adored him was now turning against him, painting him as an angry, bitter actor, twisting his words and actions to fit their narrative. But as much as the media tried to silence him, the support from his fans only grew. He began receiving messages from all corners of the world, messages from people who had experienced the same manipulation, the same control. These were people who were ready to join the fight, to take down the system that had been holding them captive. Keanu knew it was time to go public with everything. But as he prepared to expose the truth, he received a chilling message that stopped him dead in his tracks. If you go any further, we'll make sure you never see the light of day again. The threat was clear. The stakes had never been higher. Keanu stared at the message, his fingers trembling as he gripped the phone. The words echoed in his mind. We'll make sure you never see the light of day again. It was a direct threat, one he couldn't ignore. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that this was exactly what they wanted. They wanted him to be afraid, to back down. But Keanu wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. In fact, the threat only solidified his resolve. The truth had to come out no matter the cost. He couldn't let them silence him, especially now that he knew how deep the corruption ran. But as Keanu planned his next move, things began to spiral out of control. His security team reported strange activity around his home, shadowy figures lurking in the background of his security footage, cars parked across the street for hours, and phone lines being mysteriously tapped. It was clear that they were watching his every move. Keanu knew he needed to be careful, but he couldn't let this stop him. He called in his most trusted allies, people from his past who had always kept a low profile. They began to work in secret, gathering more evidence and making connections with others who had been targeted by the same system. Slowly but surely, a picture started to form, revealing just how far the network's reach truly was. But as they dug deeper, one name kept coming up, a name Keanu never expected: his own brother. Keanu's brother, once estranged from him after a bitter family dispute, had somehow become involved in this hidden web of influence and control. At first, Keanu couldn't believe it. How could his own flesh and blood be tied to this dark network? But the evidence was undeniable. His brother had been working with the same people who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes, and the more Keanu learned, the more disturbing it became. He had been used as a pawn in a much bigger game, a game that Keanu was now in the middle of. The revelation hit Keanu hard. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about his family, his past, and everything he had worked so hard to build. But there was no turning back now. The truth needed to come out, and Keanu was prepared to risk everything to expose the forces that had been pulling the strings for far too long. However, just as he was about to make his next move, a shocking twist occurred. His brother reached out, wanting to meet in person. Keanu couldn't believe what he was hearing. His brother, the one person he had never imagined being involved in this mess, was reaching out. The message was short, but it carried a weight of urgency. "We need to talk. Meet me at the old cabin. It's the only place they won't find us." Keanu felt a strange mix of emotions. He was furious, confused, and deeply hurt. How could his brother, of all people, have fallen into this world of lies and deceit? Yet part of him felt the pull of family loyalty. Despite everything, blood was thicker than water. He agreed to the meeting, telling his security to stay back, knowing full well that this could be a trap. But Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to uncover something even bigger than he had imagined. The drive to the cabin was long, the roads winding through dense trees, with no signs of life for miles. As he pulled up, the familiar, old house stood like a silent witness to years of memories. Memories of childhood laughter, family gatherings, and long-forgotten moments. But now, all that was left was the looming sense of betrayal. Keanu stepped out of his car, his hand on the gun hidden in his jacket just in case. As he approached the cabin, he saw his brother standing in the doorway, looking different, tired, anxious, and above all, conflicted. There was a moment of silence as the two locked eyes, and Keanu could see the weight of guilt in his brother's expression. "I didn't want this, Keanu," his brother said, his voice shaking. "I never thought I'd get caught up in it, but they have a way of making you do things. They have dirt on everyone, on me, on you. They know everything. I didn't want you involved, but they were watching you, waiting for the right moment. I didn't have a choice." Keanu listened, his mind racing as the pieces began to fall into place. His brother had been coerced, blackmailed into joining the network's scheme, but now he was trying to warn him. The truth was more complex than Keanu could have ever imagined. This was a game of power, a battle for control, and the stakes were much higher than just a lawsuit or media scandal. The people behind the network weren't just interested in controlling celebrities. They were interested in controlling everything. "You're not the only one they're coming after," his brother continued, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and regret. "They've been watching you for years, Keanu. They know about your charity work, your interviews, your beliefs. And now they're going to make sure you never speak out again. You have no idea what they're capable of." The words hit Keanu like a punch to the gut. He had always believed in fighting for what was right, but this was more than just a fight. It was a war against a system that had been built over decades, one that was ruthless and unyielding. Before Keanu could respond, a noise echoed from the woods behind the cabin. His heart skipped a beat. They weren't alone. Someone was out there, watching. And this time, the danger wasn't just from the network. It was from people who had been waiting for the right moment to silence them both. His brother's face turned pale. Keanu, we have to go. Now. Keanu's instincts kicked in as he spun around, his eyes scanning the dark forest beyond the cabin. The sound had been faint, but it was unmistakable. The crunching of footsteps on dry leaves, the rustling of branches. It wasn't just one person. It was multiple. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he reached for the gun hidden in his jacket, his heart pounding in his chest. His brother grabbed his arm, his grip tight with fear. "We can't outrun them," he whispered, his voice shaking. "They're everywhere." Keanu knew this wasn't just a random encounter. Someone had been tracking him, someone who knew he was getting too close to the truth. His mind raced as he assessed the situation. He couldn't let the network control his every move. He had to get out of there, but he couldn't do it alone. "Stay close," Keanu whispered back, his voice steady despite the rising panic. "We need to get to the car. Now." They moved quickly, Keanu leading the way with his brother following close behind. Each step felt like it could be their last, but the sense of urgency propelled them forward. As they neared the car, Keanu's hand reached for the door handle, but then, without warning, the sound of a voice broke through the tension. "Keanu, you didn't think we'd let you go that easily, did you?" The voice was calm, almost mocking. Keanu froze, his heart skipping a beat. He knew that voice. It was a voice from the past, one of the people who had been involved in the network's hidden operations, someone he thought he had left behind. He turned to face the figure emerging from the shadows, a smirk on their face. It was John, the former bodyguard who had warned him earlier, but now John was no longer the ally he once trusted. He was one of them. The betrayal hit Keanu harder than anything before. He had been warned about the dangers of this fight, but he had never imagined it would come from someone he once considered family. "You've made a huge mistake, Keanu," John said, his voice cold and calculating. "You should have stayed quiet. Now, you've crossed a line." Keanu felt his pulse quicken as he stared at John, trying to understand what had happened. How had this man gone from protecting him to hunting him down? His brother stepped forward, his voice desperate. "Keanu, we need to leave. It's too late. For this, it's too late for all of us." But Keanu didn't move. His gaze remained locked on John, who was now just a few steps away, a gun in hand. "I'm not running anymore," Keanu said, his voice steady with determination. "This ends now." The night air was thick with tension, the sound of distant footsteps growing louder as more figures began to appear from the woods. Keanu and his brother were surrounded. He could feel the weight of the decision he had made. There was no turning back, but just as things were about to take a deadly turn, the sound of sirens pierced the air, cutting through the tension like a knife. The cavalry had arrived. Keanu wasn't alone in this fight after all. The police, tipped off by his lawyer earlier that day, had arrived just in time. They surrounded John and his men, their guns drawn, ready to take control of the situation. John looked around in disbelief, his smirk fading as he realized that his plan had been foiled. "This isn't over, Keanu," he spat, his eyes filled with venom. "You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming next." Keanu didn't respond. He had won this round, but he knew the battle was far from over. As the police took John and the other men into custody, Keanu turned to his brother, who was still in shock. "We have a lot to talk about," Keanu said softly, placing a hand on his brother's shoulder. The storm wasn't over, but at least for now, Keanu had taken control of his destiny. The truth was out, but there was still more to uncover. And he would fight for it, no matter the cost. As Keanu sat in the back of the police car, his brother, beside him, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. What had started as a simple fight for justice had evolved into a battle for survival, against a system that would do anything to keep the truth buried. The past few days had felt like a whirlwind, betrayals, threats, close calls, and revelations that shook him to his core. But now, as the dust began to settle, Keanu realized something that gave him strength. This wasn't just his fight anymore. It was the fight of countless people who had been silenced, people whose stories had never been told. As the police transported John and the others, Keanu's phone buzzed with messages of support. The public was finally starting to see the truth. Social media was flooded with posts about the network's corruption, about how Keanu had exposed a web of deceit that had spanned decades. His fans, who had stood by him throughout the media's smear campaign, were now celebrating his victory. But even with the network in chaos, Keanu knew this was just the beginning. There were still powerful forces working behind the scenes, and they wouldn't go down easily. His fight wasn't over yet. The phone call he received from his lawyer moments later confirmed his suspicions. The network, though on its knees, wasn't finished. They had made a last-ditch attempt to silence Keanu by threatening to leak private information that would ruin his reputation for good. But Keanu wasn't afraid. He had learned that the truth was the only weapon that could defeat them. The network was powerful, but it was no match for the courage of a person willing to fight for what was right. As Keanu stepped out of the police car and into the light of a new day, he knew that the journey ahead would be long and hard, but he was no longer afraid of the shadows. The truth would shine through, the world would see it, and Keanu Reeves would stand tall, knowing that he had fought for justice not just for himself but for everyone who had ever been silenced by the powerful forces in the world. And with that, he made a promise to himself, to never stop fighting for what was right, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. Please subscribe to the channel for Keanu Reeves's respect. Thanks.